Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on Rally Authorisation and the removal of the exemptions under the Road Traffic Act. My name is Charlotte Garbett and I am your host for this session brought to you by the National Traction Engine Trust and the Steam Apprentice Club. As many of you will be aware, we have made the decision to remove the exemptions under the off-road events regulations. So here is the agenda for the next hour. We'll be covering the rationale behind removing the exemptions, what Rally Authorisation now entails as rebranded the Rally Support Scheme, how the National Traction Engine Trust and Steam Apprentice Club will be supporting you, and then what support we need from you as organisers and members. Following the presentation, we will open the floor for a Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A function at the top of the screen at any time. We will aim to answer as many unique questions as possible, and for any questions we are unable to address during the session, we will compile a Q&A document that will be circulated to all attendees after the webinar. Our sessions will be presented by Tony Seddon, Head of the Technical Services Unit, and Paul Stingmore, recently appointed Chair of the Steam Apprentice Club, who will provide their own introductions at the start of their sessions. Before we get started, just a few quick points. This session is being recorded and a replay will be made available for those who are unable to attend. If you experience any technical difficulties, try refreshing your browser or reach out to Rally Auth and I will try to support you as best I can. For the Q&A sessions, please keep questions relevant and constructive. We are here to support an informed discussion that benefits us all. And with that being said, let's get started. I'll invite Tony to begin by walking us through the changes and their impacts. Thank you.
Okay, Charlotte, could you, the slides aren't showing on screen, so I think there's an error there somewhere.
There we go, all sorted, hopefully, yeah.
Perfect, okay. I believe Paul's in the room. I've just allowed Paul in, so that should work now. I don't know whether we can hear you, Paul. Okay. Right, bear with us on this one. Okay, I'll start, and hopefully Paul will drop in on that, and we'll be all up and running. So, thank you for the intro, Charlotte. A quick introduction. So I'm Tony Seddon, as Charlotte has mentioned. I head up the Technical Services Unit of the National Traction Engine Trust. The TSU provides the technical and legislative support to all sections of the trust, including the rally organisers section. So we're there to give that support element. I'd ask you to bear in mind that we're all volunteers on the General Council. So please be patient if we don't actually respond quite as quickly as you would like. We are doing our best to try and fit it in around day jobs and obviously busy lives. So just a bit of a plea from me there. So tonight we're going to cover out what the legal term authorisation means and why it has been withdrawn and the future for the NTET and Steam Apprentice Club, and obviously the events that are run around the country. So our investigations, sort of following the sad loss of several officers of the trust who were central to the NTET, raised some concerns in some aspects of our activities. So the TSU, our section, sought advice from a specialist regulatory and Road Traffic Act lawyer. The result of this and the information that we're going to talk about tonight and the removal of authorisation was basically a reflection of this advice from this specialist lawyer. So here follows sort of a detailed sort of information which we hope will prove both useful and provide you with some reassurance on what we're going to do. So I should really start by saying there are many sort of misconceptions about what authorisation actually meant and what that provided. So we wanted to run through that to start with, and then we'll go on to what we're doing and where we're going forward with this. So, excuse me, under the off-road events regulations, the rally authorisation was introduced to ensure the legal and safe operation of off-road motoring events in our sort of element. It provided an exemption for from specific offences under the Road Traffic Act 1988 when events are held in public places that are not a public highway, so not on the actual road, as it were. And those events were authorised as long as they met the criteria of an authorised event. And so basically, in short, this is how it sort of worked. So when you came off the public highway, the requirements for driving licenses and MOT laws don't apply to vehicles and drivers on off-road regulations authorised events. However, the Road Traffic Act and the motor vehicles off-road regs themselves actually do, and so the majority of those regulations still apply. And Section 13A of the Road Traffic Act creates a legal exemption from liability for certain offences during these authorised events, as long as they comply with the prescribed standards. Now, NTET's role as an authorising body is vital in that process. So being recognised under the Motor Vehicles Off-Road Events Regs, the NTET has the authority and responsibility to do a number of things. And these are sign off on rallies as authorised events, protect pedestrians, drivers, passengers and other road users through strict adherence to safety guidelines, provide a framework to allow organisers to conduct rallies safely while fulfilling their legal obligations. And in this capacity, the NTET is more than just a facilitator. We are a guardian of the safety and compliance of those events under those regulations, and we have duties under those regulations in that case. So our duty of care extends to everybody involved in those events, ensuring that the risks are managed and appropriate protections are in place. And this recognition also means that rally organisers rely on the NTET for guidance, training and support. And it's crucial that organisers understand that whilst the exemptions apply, the organisers still have responsibilities under the Insurance Act, off-road regulations and duty of care laws. So it isn't a carte blanche to walk away and do anything that you so desire, and it doesn't absolve you from all of your responsibilities as a rally organizer. So if we can pop onto the next slide, please, Charlotte. To be clear, the removal of authorisation does not mean the end of how NTET intends to support rallies. We will still be here, and we'll talk about that in detail in a minute. It is the end of authorisation only means that the exemptions under sections 1 to 3 of the Road Traffic Act will no longer be available to the drivers on those events. And those sections 1 to 3 are causing death by dangerous driving and careless and inconsiderate driving, okay, which hopefully nobody should be doing on a rally field. So if we can pop onto the next slide, please. A bit of detail about why we've removed ourselves from authorising events and why authorisation is being removed, and hopefully you'll understand the detail about this then. Whilst the NTET held a vital role in rally authorisation under the regulations, there are several critical gaps in our current processes, and that significantly undermines our ability to fulfil our responsibilities as an authorising body. Critical to the function of what we did was training, and training is a fundamental part of equipping you, the rally organisers, with the knowledge and tools to ensure that your events are run in a safe and compliant manner. However, to be clear, we've not carried out any training sessions in the last 2 years. We've been unable to do that. Without the critical support, organisers may not be adequately informed of their responsibilities, leaving them and NTET exposed to potential risks. So as you can see, we've got a number of issues here, and those issues are on screen, so I'm not going to read those to you, but those are a number of issues in terms of volunteer levels, in terms of offerings that we could do, and duty of care and liability was becoming a problem. So I'll talk through those as we go. Despite advertising and talking about these lack of volunteers, despite advertising, we don't actually currently have a rally organiser's head to oversee this compliance. We don't have a rally authorisation officer, and we don't have a sufficient number of rally monitors to ensure that events meet the required standards. And those are all requirements under the Code of Practice. Without these critical roles filled, to be clear about this, we can't effectively monitor the events and we can't address safety issues proactively. And this leaves us gaps in due diligence. And that actually could lead to liability for both the NTET itself and actually personally. The liability would extend or potentially could extend to the trustees and officers within the trust. So we've got a number of issues, as I say, lack of sufficient volunteers, gaps in what we could offer the rallies in terms of training and so on, the ability to discharge our duty of care, and the fact that the Code of Practice is not fully up to date with the legislative and insurance requirements did leave a big hole and did leave us with some issues, and that the advice from the lawyers was that left us with liabilities which were quite possibly going to be rolled over onto the officers and to the NTET itself. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So how will previously authorised rallies continue? Well, the rallies will continue exactly as they have in previous years. The only difference, as I say, will be that the drivers will no longer have an exemption from the offences under Section 1 to 3 of the Road Traffic Act. So that's the three that I listed before. And to be clear, the Steam Apprentice Club operation will not be affected. It won't make any. It should not make any difference to those elements of the SAC. So if we move on to the next one, please. Okay, so I'm going to run through these points and I'm going to go through them in order to try and make it clear as to what exactly the implications of this are. So firstly, I'm going to run through what we did offer and then what we're going to offer as an alternative. So previously, we offered the Code of Practice for rally organisers to run under. We provided free access to the Purple Guide for authorised events. We included the authorised events on the circulation of the rally list. We gave authorised events access to the NTET's DISC scheme to make checking of boiler certificates and insurance elements a bit more simple. And we offered training to the rally organisers. And then for the drivers, as I say, there were exemptions if it was an authorised event under offences under the Road Traffic Act, which meant that you couldn't, if you were driving at an authorised event, be guilty of offences under sections 1 to 3, as I've detailed. And then as a rally organizer, that would help you to demonstrate compliance with the off-road events regulations and potentially with the health and safety legislation and insurance acts. So what are we removing? Well, we're removing those two elements for now, and that's removed as we've removed authorization, and we're moving on to rebrand the scheme. And under the rebranding of the Rally Support Scheme, the events that are run under that and register with that become supported events, okay, rather than authorized events. And that will mean that you'll still get the majority of the benefits that you had previously. So you will still get the access to what we're rebranding as a good practice guide for rally organisers. So that's effectively the Code of Practice in a new format. You'll still get access to the Purple Guide. You'll still get access to the rally list if you want to be included on that list and still be able to be promoted in that way. You'll still have access to the insurance DISC scheme, so you'll still be able to check those DISCs and insurance documents in advance of the event. And then we are aiming in due course to continue offering training to events and rally organisers, subject to certain aspects. We're looking to introduce a health and safety and legal support scheme, so that will give you access to health and safety and legal professionals in due course if you are a registered event. And what we're going to do in recognition of sort of the things that went, the fees that were previously paid, and the fact that we had to withdraw this this last year, we are going to offer it free for the 2025 rally season. So any event can register as a supported event and gain those benefits free of charge for the event. Now, to be clear, we are intending to reintroduce a fee from 2026 onwards, because the elements of support that we are providing will have a cost to the trust, and we need to make sure that we charge appropriately and cover those costs. What those levels of cost will be, we're hoping not to increase in any massive way, but we will be discussing those with you in due course. But as I say, free for 2025. So if we move on, please. We might get asked the question, will authorisation return? Well, to be clear, we are still recognised in statute, so in the regulations, as an authorising body under the off-road events regulations. So we will still be in that document, and we will still be entitled to provide authorisation if we so desire. So the answer to the question is we could reintroduce it. We could reintroduce authorisation if it was felt both desirable and appropriate at a future date. But at the present moment in time, we don't feel that is appropriate. So it could come back, but not at the current stage. So if we can move on, please. So how can you help us, or how can people help us? Well, frankly, we need to identify and find, and we're looking for a new rally support officer to help lead and develop the scheme. So we've got the ideas there. We've got quite a lot of it in place already, and we're moving forward with the rest of it. But we do need somebody to take that role and to lead and develop that. So that's a newly created role, and that will provide an exciting opportunity to shape the future of the scheme and support rally organisers such as those on the call tonight. Key responsibilities for that rally support officer will be being a primary point of contact, so that's serving as the main sort of liaison and overseeing those events and managing invitation forms, confirming acceptance and all that sort of good stuff from the scheme. It will be an event coordination role, so consolidating and maintaining the list of supported events and ensuring that we update our website and the list appropriately so people can see those events online and be able to see which events have become supported events. They will be there to provide escalation and compliance, so acting as the escalation point for rally organisers, referring any legal or health and safety queries to NTET, to the General Council, TSU, etc., and coordinating with the third-party provider for expert guidance. Then moving on, training and coordination, so arranging and facilitating these training sessions through the external provider based on requests from you, the supported events. And also finally, it'll be a compliance and policy support role, so collaborating with the TSU, our section, to ensure that the Rally Support Scheme, the Good Practice Guide, is reviewed and updated annually where necessary, so we keep up to date with any changes in legislation and any health and safety changes. So it's a new role, as I say, and we're looking for people to provide that support. Excuse me. And we would ask you to please feel free to email rally.auth@ntet.co.uk if you feel you can help in any way with that role. We would be delighted to hear from you. Okay, so I think that's me finished for now. I don't know whether we've got Paul online at the minute. Can Paul hear us?
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Paula?
Lovely. Thanks, Paul. Over to you.
Thanks very much. I guess just a bit of intro from me. So I'm currently chairman of the Steam Apprentice Club. That was the tail end of last year that became a thing. Before that, I started to volunteer with the club last summer, and really driven by the fact that I wanted our hobby to continue. I really believe in investing time in kids so that they can get the opportunities to get on engines. So I feel really passionately about it. It was Nick's kind of plea and steaming, saying, well, there might not be a club unless someone steps forward. That meant I went and got involved. I hadn't really considered it before then. and it's and I made a kind of joking comment to someone else and said, actually, the only role I'd ever consider would be one looking after the Steam Apprentice Club with the NTET. And Ian Langley that's telling me that I've put weight on, he's absolutely right, so he's got to stop sending me messages. But it's really true that I kind of felt really passionate about doing this and getting into a good space and making sure that the club can sustain in the future. I say all of that because, of course, then decisions like this I take really seriously. In terms of me, I've got an engine myself. I've got a 4CD, having sadly sold my Fowler last year, just because it was a bit of a pain to move around. So I guess I wanted to start by talking about where we are as a club. There's currently 6 core volunteers, trying to cover us nationally in terms of getting round to all of your rallies. It's a pretty tall order, and we are seriously thin on the ground. So more volunteers always welcome, and we're certainly seeing demand kind of outstripping supply. Nonetheless, we do try and get as far as we can and as often as we can get Lady Sylvia, the club's engine, out and get out there to rallies and try and drive kind of engines being able to get kids being able to get onto engines. I absolutely supported the decision to withdraw authorisation in terms of that piece of exemption because I don't believe it makes any difference for our STEAM apprentices. I guess let me start by saying, why do I support that decision? The first thing then is actually I think it's entirely unconscionable for us to be exempting people from death by dangerous driving. If it were my niece or nephew, or it doesn't really matter who, if someone got killed because someone's been acting incredibly irresponsibly and driving dangerously, I don't really want to give them an exemption from that. Secondly, that exemption wouldn't apply to you as rally organisers. You can still be prosecuted under the health and safety legislation with kind of serious liability there, as could I as a trustee of the NTET. I don't think that's right, and so I wasn't willing to stand by that when I heard the legal advice. Finally, I am really confident that actually apprentices can continue to drive. So let me tell you a bit about that. Firstly, in terms of the roads, I think it's really clear apprentices cannot drive on the road without a driving licence. It is illegal. Steering is a bit more vague. There are some specific circumstances where no licence is required. It's associated with kind of speed and with the type of wheels on the engine or tyres. So if they're still tyres, then as I understand it, actually no licence required. On rally fields, though, which is the thing I think most of us in the room really care about for this evening's conversation, no driving licence is required, but the rest of the Road Traffic Act applies. So that means people need to be either competent or supervised by someone that's confident. They need to be insured. So we just need to be making sure that those provisions are in place. As long as they are, STEAM apprentices can continue to drive on rally fields. The code of practice definitely had some inconsistencies, and I've been working with Tony and Charlotte to try and clean those up essentially and really get so it's really clear actually what should people be doing and make sure everyone's safe. In terms of the club itself, when we are at a rally, we will continue to ask for a dedicated playpen so that novice apprentices who have not really kind of cut their teeth yet can actually start to learn with a bit of space around them without the risk of the public kind of walking in front of the engine. That said, that's us kind of taking a risk managed approach to delivering quite a lot of apprentices in a small space of time at a rally and getting them onto kind of miniatures and building that experience up. If they're a bit more confident and they're big enough and they're strong enough and they've got enough height that they can see around a full-size engine, I will have absolutely no qualms whatsoever in having them up on my engine, either with me supervising them driving or with steering as long as that they're kind of physically able and capable to be kind of sensible in the role that we're asking them to do. But there is nothing in the law that says we can't do that. I checked my insurance provision today. So I'm with Tollgate. It's very clear. It says that under 21s can drive, but that there will be an excess associated with that policy. So if there's an accident, it costs me £300 extra on excess because of if it was that young person's fault. Regardless, they will continue to be on my engine this summer, and we will be out there kind of trying to drive as much of that experience as possible. I guess final thoughts from me. The demand is certainly outstripping supply for the club at the moment. We are trying to update the website at the moment. We're about to release in the next steaming essentially the kind of model that says actually what should engine owners, what should crew expect of apprentices, what should parents expect to be doing to support engine owners and crews helping their kids on the engines, what's reasonable. You know, an hour with an apprentice is quite a long time actually, and that's perfectly reasonable at the end of that to say thank you very much, go back to mum and dad now, or go back to the Steam Apprentice Club stand and we'll find something else for them to do. So we're starting to put those kind of principles and foundations in place. We're also making sure that we're trying to get our kind of own insurance sorted out for driving days, so we can do more of those hopefully. And equally, as I say, really trying to grow that volunteer base to get as many volunteers out there as we possibly can. If there are any people in the north of England, we're really short up there, please let me know if you'd like to become the Steam Apprentice Club contingent for the north, and we will give you all the training you need to get you there. On training then, my final thought, I'd really love to run a workshop session with rally organisers if there's enough appetite to say, look, if we can't get to your rally, I mentioned Ian Langley before, I've said to Ian I can't cover his rally this year, but I'd love it if we can get more playpens running. So I'm very up for running a workshop to say this is what we've learned, this is how we do it, and these are the things to consider. So if people are interested in that, drop me a message at my Steam Apprentice Club chairman email address, and absolutely we'll put a workshop in place and try and do that. So rallies can essentially take on some of the kind of running of those playpens on their own, if that's kind of appeal to them. Really interested to see if there is kind of appetite for that. I think that's probably me, and then let's move over to some Q&A unless you've got anything to add, Tony.
I've just got one last point to make, which I think is important for people to understand. We have been in contact with the three insurers that insure over 95% of the engines that are on the disc scheme. And there are a few exceptions from that, which we can't obviously contact everybody's individual insurers one by one, but 90-odd%, virtually all of the discs are issued by the three major insurers, and I have clarified with all of those three that they do cover non-licensed drivers, and two of those a requirement of that, which is Tollgate and one broker, a requirement of that is that they're a bona fide member of the Steam Apprentice Club, and Walker Midgley permit it, but they permit non-licensed drivers, but they don't place that requirement on the insurance, so it could be a non-SAC member. So those insurances have been checked. I have also been in contact with those insurers in relation to event insurance, and those that provide the event insurance under those three main companies, none of them have a requirement that the event has to be authorised, and they do provide insurance to non-authorised events. We do know that there is potentially odd events out there that run under different insurance, and I have been informed of one specific event that has authorisation as a condition of their insurance. I'm happy to take that up with that insurance company and explain the implications of that. And all I would ask is that those events, if they find that is the case, please contact us and we'll pick that up and talk to those insurers on your behalf to explain why that's not possible anymore. So that was really the other key points I wanted to make. Okay. So have we got some questions, Charlotte?
We have indeed got some questions that have come through, and also just a reminder, if you've got any questions now, we are in the Q&A section, so please put your questions in the Q&A function at the top of your screen. So the first question that we have is, does the no license required on our events apply to any vehicle?
Okay, so technically speaking, the Section 87 of the Road Traffic Act, which is the section that governs licensing requirements, ceases to apply the minute you leave the public highway, i.e. the road itself. So technically, licensing requirements don't apply. However, and this is an absolute that you need to understand, the insurance requirements for those vehicles follows them onto the rally field. So the requirements to have RTA insurance for that vehicle does apply on the rally field. So that's why we have asked the specific questions about non-licensed and young drivers of the insurers that we deal with, because if you don't have insurance, then you should not be driving on that field, regardless of licensing elements. So I think that probably answers the question and gives you the information you need.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, so how does this affect full-size and miniature engines that aren't road registered?
So the requirement still exists to have insurance. So they need to demonstrate RTA insurance in some way, shape or form. Whether an insurer will cover a non-registered vehicle in RTA cover is a question that you'd need to address to your insurers directly, because we don't have access necessarily to everybody's insurers, but the insurance requirement is still there. So they would need to prove that insurance covers you off-road under the RTA cover.
Okay, so we've had another question in on email rather than in the Teams chat. So what is the process for applying to the Rally Support Scheme, and when will the forms be sent out?
Okay, so we're reviewing the forms, and we've done the lion's share of that now. So those forms will be available very, very soon, and that should be in the next week or 10 days or so. And we will be contacting all the previously authorised events with that information. So you should be able to get that. And I'm hoping that we're going to place those on the website for download. So that should be available then.
Okay, and on the back of that question, we've got, when will training commence for rally organisers, and what level of legal advice will be available?
In terms of training, that one is one of the things that we are working on, and that really depends on the availability of a rally support officer and somebody to pick that up and run with it, rather, because obviously we can't do everything, but that's the intention, is to get that training up and running as one of the priorities. And in terms of legal advice, we've been speaking obviously with the people that we taken legal advice off, and we commercially with my business, I run that sort of an organisation and that provides advice to members, and we've previously negotiated that advice from them. I see this, and we've got to have that conversation, but I see this as an extension to that, and I think we'll be able to provide that advice service where you get an element of advice free of charge before the rally season starts, and we'll be able to confirm what that level is and how much is available before the season starts. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Then just publishing one now, and this one is directed at you, Paul. So is there any way the apprentices could be insured through their membership?
We are looking at, we've asked the question. The challenge we have is that insurance always has to associate itself with a vehicle, unless you're a motor trader. I don't see many of our apprentices becoming motor traders before they hit 16. There's a few entrepreneurial ones out there, but I don't think they'll be doing that. So it looks unlikely. We really are kind of dependent on engines being insured, and so when apprentices are at rallies, if they're on the club's engine, they're operating under the club's insurance. If they're climbing onto your engine, they're operating under your insurance. And the same if they get onto my engine, they're operating under that policy because it associates with the vehicle. And we've not managed to find a way so far of building that kind of group cover in place. Have I got that right, Tony? Is there anything I missed?
No, 100%, Paul. So I have had conversations with a couple of the insurers, and they've said exactly that. The problem lies is that the cover needs to tie to a vehicle under the RTA, and therefore it becomes very, very difficult to provide that. So I think the likelihood of being able to provide club level cover is probably remote. Not something that we'll give up on, but it's probably remote.
Okay, so I'm just releasing another question. So we have a large working plant section. Most of these do not go on the road, so won't have RTA insurance. What insurance should they have?
Well, that's a good question, and it's not one that I've prepared because we've prepared this around the actual authorisation and the off-road regs, and that specifically applies to RTA. So it's not one that I've actually prepared. However, off the top of my head, and being quite frank, I think they will have to have, if it's an area that's open to the public, they will have to have RTA cover. So if they can't get that, then they shouldn't be operating in a public area on the field. I would suggest that you would contact your own insurers to see what their requirements would be in terms of any roped off and demonstration areas where the public don't have access, and they may be able to clarify that for you. And I'm quite happy to take that away and look at it and provide that feedback in due course if that's something that you want us to do. Just drop us an email and we'll pick it up.
I guess, Tony, just picking up on that, one of the things it's worth rally organisers thinking about as well is if they have got those areas where the public aren't authorised because they're behind ropes and kind of safety fencing and whatever, actually having those signs on there that say no public access, regardless of us talking about authorisation or not, is probably a really sensible move, given that the RTA does apply unless the public haven't got access to that space. Now you'd have to argue what that looks like, but I'd have thought as a minimum having some signs up saying no public access would be a really sensible thing.
Okay, we haven't got any questions at the moment, so has anybody any other questions? We have a raised hand.
Are you able to pop it in the Q&A?
Yes,
Jack,
if you could put it in the Q&A, Jack, that would be great. Thank you.
Whilst Jack's typing or anyone else is thinking of questions,
he's popped it in. So sorry, Paul. I
was going to say it's probably worth us just restating contact details as well. I'm sure they'll come up at the end, but mine is sac.chairman@ntet.co.uk, I think, but it is also on the NTET website as everyone else's. But I'll hand back to Charlotte. Hopefully that question.
Yes. Okay, right. So just releasing another question now. So going back to authorisation, can we have further standardisation across playpens? It has been noted that these have become somewhat dangerous.
So I think this will form part of the review of the good practice guide that we're going to issue. Obviously, if it's an event that we are not involved with, we're not providing support to or whatever, we really don't have any influence over them. We can influence the people we issue the support guides to, but we can't influence non-supported events. So we will be including various bits in the review of those guidance documents, and I would suggest it's going to be in there.
Okay. So one more question. This is an easy win. So will you make the recording available with the slides? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Covered those questions off, but if there are any others.
We'll wait for a second, I suggest.
Okay. Right, so just releasing a question to the chat now. So this is, what is the youngest age is the NTET saying it is okay for a driver to steer an engine?
So that's probably a Paul question, really.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is a youngest age. I don't think that's stipulated in law if you're off-road, on-road, steering engines, and I kind of alluded to this before, but I'm going to check that I get this right, and Tony can correct me if I don't. Steering engines on the public highway, if your engine is clad with rubber tyres, it will not fall under the law that essentially says it's limited to 5 miles per hour. So that means that they should have a license if you're on the road. If your engine is still tired, i.e. it's on strakes or it's a roller still on its original rolls, not being rubbered, then it could be classed as being limited to, or it should be classed as being limited to 5 miles per hour. At that point, there isn't an age restriction, but I would suggest that the young person needs to be of suitable size, strength, mindset. If you suddenly put an 8-year-old on an engine on the road, I would probably be quite frightened. So I certainly wouldn't be suggesting that, but I think it's up to you then to make sure that you're happy. They've kind of got everything about them that they're going to be sensible if something goes wrong, and that you've got suitable insurance in place. On a rally field, I think it's all about size, and by that I mean let's be proportionate. If they've never been on an engine before, I don't think it's about age at that point. I think it's about taking them to a nice big open space without lots of members of the public tripping over you, to build some of that experience. If actually they're fairly competent and they've kind of proven that in different environments, then it's about actually let's just make sure that the size of the engine is proportionate to them. So I had a few apprentices on my Fowler last summer, and they weren't actually physically strong enough to move the reversing lever, or to close the regulator without two hands on it. At that point, I think they need to be on a slightly smaller engine that's more appropriate to their size. So it's not about age. I think it's very much about if you're off-road, for steering or driving, it's then about actually can you operate it safely, and have you got the right mindset.
Yeah, so just to add on to your point, Paul, the 5 miles an hour restriction applies to a motor vehicle or a motor vehicle that's drawing one or more trailers, where any wheel is not fitted with a pneumatic or a resilient, as they say, a rubber tyre. So that would be 5 miles an hour. So anything with a steel wheel or a steel wheel in the chain technically is restricted to 5 mph, and therefore you're right. There is no license requirements. It's an exemption for steersmen. But if it's got any resilient tyres or a combination of resilient tyres and pneumatic tyres in that train, then the speed limit is 20 miles per hour. And at that point, I'm afraid driver licensing requires requirements apply to steersmen. And that's all in the in Schedule 8, in Section 86 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984, and it's detailed in Schedule 6 Part 2. So it's all in detail in there, and reflected from that in section I think Section 87 from memory, which is the driver licensing element.
Okay, and then just on the back of that question, it says also to be in charge of an engine, miniature or full size, on a field. So I think we covered that in the response, but is there anything else you wanted to add to the response we've just provided there?
I don't think there's anything else. No.
Other than if people want a conversation, they can reach out, obviously, and have a conversation about it. But I think I've been fairly clear in saying I think it's about being proportionate to the size of the engine, and it's about level of experience, frankly, in terms of the environment you put them in.
Okay, I've just seen a hand raise.
It's Robert. Yeah, Robert Herring.
Yeah, if you could type the question in, so then we could admit it to be discussed, that would be much appreciated. And then I'm just releasing another question now. So that is, can you identify when the safety at rallies course identified in the code of practice is likely to be run again?
Yeah, so as I say, that's completely dependent on volunteers and having a suitable person to provide that training, and that's what we're working on at the minute, which is why it was asterisked in the slide that we detailed what we were going to be offering. So in due course, I can't say when exactly at the minute. We're working on that, so hopefully very soon.
Okay. Just wait for a few more questions to come in.
I'm feeling anxious clearly the silence isn't doing me a lot of good. What will be the next question?
Yeah, it's a bit like question time.
It is, isn't it?
Okay, I don't know whether Robert's managed to type his question, but there we go.
Well, I will just say, if we don't cover it in the session, and if you have a question after having had time to think about what we've presented, then do reach out to the rally.auth@ntet.co.uk email address with any questions, and we'll aim to get back to you as soon as possible.
Just a final bit of padding as well, and then if there are no more questions, I guess we'll stop. From a STEAM Apprentice Club perspective, for those of you that have reached out to ask whether we can be there, I'm trying to make sure I respond to every message. If I haven't and I've missed it, you can feel free to chase me. Equally, we're intending to publish where we will be, both in Steaming and across social media, so particularly Facebook, but once the web pages are refreshed, then on the web pages too, so apprentices know exactly where to find us. And if we're going to be at one of your rallies, we will of course be promoting that on our own social media pages. Ian's privately messaging me asking, he can't get into the chat, but asking if there's a way these rules can be published and easily accessible. Absolutely, I think is the answer, Ian. The intention is we'll update the guidance, and we'll try and make it as easy and consumable as possible, because the law's pretty grey in this area, and I think it's in all of our interests to try and get it a lot clearer for people. So we want to make that advice that's come from the lawyers kind of available to as many people as possible, so everyone's both safe and legal.
Okay, so we've had a few more questions come in. So section 2C was to cause injury by inconsiderate driving, which equates to smuts and minor burns. And then section 3 didn't require injury, which equates to careless driving and stress from whistles. So I assume, is that a question or sort of stating the legislation? Shall we have a sort of discussion about that one?
I have to say, this is only a personal opinion. I'm kind of not even wearing my NTET hat at this time. I think it's dangerous to assume what those charges would relate to, and make that assumption. I think depending on circumstance, and whatever's happened, at the end of the day, it's within the police's remit and the HSE remit to make decisions about what they want to prosecute against, and therefore saying it's because of this or because of that feels to me like quite a big set of assumptions to be making, and certainly ones I wouldn't personally support, but each to their own.
And I can jump in on this as well. So reading from the RTA, section 2C that's been referred to, a person who causes serious injury to another person by driving a mechanically propelled vehicle on a road or other public place without due care and attention, or without reasonable consideration for other persons using the road or place, is guilty of an offence. And then it goes on to specify what serious injury means. And serious injury means, in England and Wales, physical harm which amounts to grievous bodily harm for the purposes of the Offences Against the Persons Act, and in Scotland, severe physical injury. So I think, as Paul says, it's not for me to say what that actually is, because that would be a court of law that does that. But you need to ask yourself whether that would be considered grievous bodily harm. That's probably best left there.
Okay, so we've got another question in terms of the insurance. So are any insurers suggesting that there would be advantages in terms of cover and premiums if the rally is run under these new guidelines?
So a lot of the the three main insurers that insure steam engines currently I think offer premiums to people based on the fact that they are insuring with them, and whether they are or aren't an NTET member, or whether they are or aren't running under these events. It's not to say that that's not something that we're going to pick up with them and talk to them about. So early days, but watch this space.
Okay. No questions at the moment. So I'd say last few minutes to, okay. We've had a nice thank you from our chair. So thank you, Rob. Any other questions?
You've got 7 minutes.
We have got 7 minutes, yes. Yes.
As has been said by Paul and Charlotte, please, if you've got any questions that you think of after this, please reach out. We'll do our best to answer them. And as I say, we're quite happy to share the information as we see it, and we've done that as best as we can tonight. So.
And if there is appetite for people, if you think actually that's something you'd like to do in terms of having a playpen at your rally and not being as dependent on the Steam Apprentice Club to rock up and run it for you, if you think actually you can find a couple of people to run it for a weekend and a couple of miniatures, then do let me know. I am really interested if you think you've got appetite for us running a workshop that says, how do we do this? How do we go about it? What does our risk assessment look like? What are the actions we take? Really happy to share any kind of activities we do, any of the collateral we've got to make it possible for you to do your own as well, because ultimately that means we'll get more apprentices on engines, which can only be a good thing. So if you're interested in that, please, whether you say in the chat to Charlotte, she'll pass on details, or whether you email me afterwards, let me know. If you're not, no worries, but would be good to understand if there's appetite there or not.
Okay, I've got one final question, and I think covering this one will probably make us up to time, so I'll just release it now. So what has brought about this change?
Well, I sort of covered that in the early slides
Yeah.
in the presentation, really, but in short, when we've had certain sad losses in the officers of the trust and people who held roles within that within the trust, it has made us go back and look at a lot of different areas, because we've had to make sure we were covering them suitably, and that has raised questions, and therefore we've sought legal advice on this situation and the shortfalls that we have in terms of staffing and in terms of the ability to operate elements of the scheme. So effectively, that's meant that the legal advice has pointed out that there are a number of issues that we face, not least being compliant with our own code of practice, which will now be, as I say, rebranded, and therefore the potential liability to both the trust and personally to the trustees of the trust and the officers of the trust. So we felt that was untenable, and we had to review that in line with that legal advice. So,
And I've had one more message privately asking me whether the trust can provide risk assessments and method statements for things like running playpens. The answer, I think, is absolutely yes, but I'd want to do it in parallel with running with people attending a workshop that says this is our approach, not hours and hours, probably an hour session or something. But what I wouldn't want to do is just put that kind of collateral out there without knowing I've kind of had the conversation with people and we've landed this is how we work, as well as the kind of artifacts that support that. So yes, absolutely, but probably would want to do that alongside some form of working session of an hour just on Teams or something. And if that's the case, as I say, express appetite and we'll see what we can do for you.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes to go. I think we might be able to do one more question before we wrap up, if that's okay. So this one is for you, Paul, and it is if there is more than one engine and crew in the playpen, are the other crews classed as public?
We don't think so, based on kind of the assessment of what we've got. So the first thing I guess to say is the requirement for RTA application still applies anyway. The point of us having a separate playpen is we're laying on an additional kind of layer of risk management. Essentially, what we're doing there is saying, well, actually, we've got some inexperienced drivers. Let's not put lots of kind of obstacles in their way. Let's make sure they've got a clear path. So would they be considered as public? I'm not sure. It's kind of irrelevant. The point is we're creating room for them. Would I want 6, 8 engines in a relatively small arena of sort of miniature engines with instructing going on? Probably not. Typically, we try and keep it to 2 or 3 so that we've got kind of good space between the engines and people can walk alongside the miniatures kind of with full control. So that would be my approach on that one.
But going on to other, and I would agree what Paul said, but going on to full-size playpens, obviously, again, we're in that same situation, and I would suggest that Paul's statement about we don't believe so, because they are actually not competitors, that's the wrong term, but participants in the event rather than members of the general public. They're actually crews for those engines. I don't believe they would be, but again, using sort of sensible risk assessment and doing your due diligence as rally organisers, because you can't walk away from your responsibilities to do this. You should be doing those risk assessments and deciding what you feel is appropriate. And no doubt the guidance that we issue in due course will cover elements of this. So it's down to really to risk assessment and working out what good looks like, really.
Okay, so we're coming up to 8:30, so that's the webinar for today. And of course, as we've said throughout the session, if you've got any questions, please do reach out to us on email. We'd be glad to hear from you. We aim to help as best we can. So thank you ever so much for your time and attention this evening, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
everyone.
all.
Cheers.